Now, I didn't know that this wasn't common knowledge. And if you didn't know this, that means you don't follow me. But white people have always indulged in cannibalism. They ate their slaves and they ate black people that were free after the Emancipation Proclamation, after lynchings. If you didn't know this, you don't follow me. And if you don't follow me, you should follow me. My name's Chemistry. I teach Black history. I'm not part of Hillman Talk. I just do this for fun and out of the passion that I have for spreading Black history. And just like everything else on my page, I'm not just feeding you a bunch of bullshit. There are a plethora of books that you can look into that proves that this is a fact. Books like The Delectable Negro, which covers recipes of how to eat black people. Another book called Edible People, The Historical Consumption of Negroes and Foreigners, and I believe it was like The Cannibalistic Trade. And that's just two of many. But yeah, if you want to know more about the topic, if you scroll down on my page, I have a video called White People Ate Black People. It's very, very informative. So go ahead, learn you something, follow me. I teach Black history. Also tap my link tree. I have a nonprofit, a YouTube, all that good stuff. And it is true. The reason we don't have a lot of Egyptian mummies is because white people ate them. And it wasn't just one or two. They ate them by the hundreds and almost to extinction. It was during the Victorian era. And if you know anything about the Victorian era, it was a long time after Egypt was already well established. And if you know anything about Egypt, it is a very complex civilization. That's where we had the hieroglyphs. That's where we had large towering statues and figurines that one's mind simply just could not comprehend on how it was created. It was very advanced, way more advanced than the Victorian people during the Victorian era in England. The thing about this was the reason they ate these mummies, and the reason that I guess it still kind of remains today, the reason that they eat these black people is because they want to embody that progression. They wanted to advance, progress their civilization. And during the Victorian era, they figured what better way to progress than to eat the dead people who have been mummified in a progressive. I'm sorry, I'm trying to make sense of this, but that's literally their logic. Not to mention, it wasn't just, oh, they're going to eat them. They turned these mummies into medicine, known as mummier. Now, the use of this mummier, began in the 12th century and ended in the 18th century. It's also believed that this is actually where England and like Europe inherited and I say inherited loosely, inherited the idea that there was an afterlife, because the afterlife is very much real, especially when it came to ancient Egypt. They honored their ancestors. They did veneration. People like the priestesses and things that walk this ground, they were like embodiments of what is beyond what we see, right? And in the Victorian era, they kind of struggled with that. They didn't really know. So long story short, they ate us because they wanted what we had.
Buck breaking is a form of sexual abuse which became very popular in the Caribbean. It was used by white slave owners as well as merchants. What made buck breaking distinct from other punishments was that only male slaves were victims. Buck breaking was done to cripple the ego and strength of the male slaves. Most slaves, after being asterisk, committed suicide as they could not live with the shame.
From King Leopold II of Belgium to colonial missionaries, 1883. Reverends, fathers, and dear compatriots, the task that is given to fulfill is very delicate and requires much tact. You will go certainly to evangelize, but your evangelism must inspire above all Belgium interest. Your principal objective in our mission in the Congo is never to teach the niggers to know God. This they know already. They speak and admit to a Mungu, one in Zambi, one in Zakumba, and what else, I don't know. They know that to kill, to sleep with someone else's wife, to lie and to insult is bad. Have courage to admit it. You are not going to teach them what they know already. Your essential role is to facilitate the task of administrators and industrials, which means you will go to interpret the gospel in the way it will be the best to protect your interest in the parts of the world. For these things, you have to keep watch on disinteresting our savages from the richness that is plenty in their underground. To avoid that, they get interested in it and make you murderous, competition, and dream one day to overthrow you. Your knowledge of the gospel will allow you to find text ordering, and encouraging your followers to love poverty. Like, happier are the poor, because they will inherit the heaven. And it's very difficult for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. You have to detach from them and make them disrespect everything which gives courage to affront us. I make reference to their mystic system and their war fetish, warfare protection, which they pretend not to want to abandon, and you must do everything in your power to make it disappear. Your action will be directed essentially to the younger ones, for they won't revolt when the recommendation of the priest is contradictory to their parents' teachings. The children have to learn to obey what the missionary recommends, who is the father of their soul. You must singularly insist on their total submission and obedience. Avoid developing the spirit in the schools. Teach the student to read and not to reason. There, dear patriots, are some of the principles that you must apply. You'll find many other books which will be given to you at the end of the conference. Evangelize these niggers so that they stay forever in submission to the white colonialists, so they never revolt against the restraints they are going. Recite every day, happy are those who are weeping, because the kingdom of God is for them. Convert always the blacks by using the whip. Keep their women in 9 months of submission to work freely for us. Force them to pay you in sign of recognition goats, chicken or eggs every time you visit their villages. And make sure that niggers never become rich. Sing every day that it is impossible for the rich to enter heaven. Make them pay tax each week at Sunday Mass. Use the money supposed for the poor to build flourishing business centers. Institute a confessional system which allows you to be good detectives, announcing any black that has a different consciousness contrary to that of the decision maker. Teach the niggers to forget their heroes and to adore only ours. Never present a chair to a black that comes to visit you. Don't give him more than 1 cigarette. Never invite him for dinner, even if he gives you a chicken every time you arrive at his house. The above speech, which shows the real intention of the Christian missionary journey in Africa, was exposed to the world by Mr. Mukwani Bukoko, born in the Congo in 1915, and who in 1935, while working in the Congo, bought a second-hand Bible from a Belgian priest who forgot the speech in the Bible, Dr. Chidozie Okoro.
Lance and Whitefeather kept motion-activated Arlo cameras on the children, one in the shed on the 14-year-old boy and 16-year-old girl, and one in a room upstairs with no bed, only a tarp floor that stayed on the 9-year-old girl and 11-year-old boy. The video showed a daily routine of waking up early and being forced to stand with hands on head, unable to change or shower, receiving only peanut butter sandwiches to eat before going back to bed on the floor. In the shed, the teens used a camper toilet, holding a sheet up for each other to shield the other from the camera. Lieutenant Pyle said she first began hearing about this in August before the shed discovery, but testified could never quite get a hold of a CPS worker to follow up.
There was a contact made with a worker once, but there was no further contact to coordinate going and making a visit to the residence together.
The jury saw days of video the Arlo cameras saved, including the moments deputies busted in the door on the shed on October 2nd.
You're okay.
The children were turned over to Child Protective Services, and when Lance and Whitefeather got back with 2 of the children that night, they were later arrested. But that was just the beginning of their charges and the investigation. On Friday, the jury got an inside look at Whitefeather's cell phone. This included text messages between she and Lance where they referred to the kids as monkeys and pigs. Often Lance would describe physical punishment, where he said he, quote, knocked one
about the Indian-American War. The Sand Creek Massacre occurred on November 29, 1864, when Colorado militia attacked a peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho village in southeastern Colorado. Led by Colonel John Chivington, the militia killed over 150 Native Americans, predominantly women and children. This brutal assault sparked outrage and highlighted the tension between settlers and native tribes. Many of the victims were members of the Southern Cheyenne, seeking refuge under U.S. protection. The massacre remains a symbol of the violent conflicts during westward expansion. It raised questions about the morality of U.S. policies towards Native Americans. Follow for more.